Are you looking to do deals and master flipping houses? Welcome to the Do Deals Show with our host, Mr. Tim Mai. As a successful investor and mentor to many real estate investors, Tim's students consistently run 6- and 7-figure investing businesses. Each week, you'll hear from top real estate investors who share the best strategies, systems, and secrets that you can use to be more successful. Tim and his guests will pull back the curtain for you to learn their exact tactics, tricks, and tools that are working best right now in today's real estate market. Now, let's welcome Mr. Tim Mai.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another interview. I'm your host, Tim Mai, and on the line with me today, I have Stewart Spence. Stu is a retired real estate investor. He's retired off of his rental properties, and he does flipping part-time for fun, just to keep himself busy, right? And Stu has been in this business for a long time, over 30 years. He's an ex-accountant, so he knows a lot about the financial side of things as well. And so he's going to teach us today on how to set up your retirements, such that you have passive income that are free and clear, that are all paid for, with no leverage to be able to retire off of. So, Stu, thank you so much for being on this interview with us.
Thank you very much, Tim. It's great to be here. It's a pleasure to be able to spend a little bit of time with you guys. I'm looking forward to it. Awesome.
All right, Stu, well, I know this is kind of way back, but take us back. Take us back what got you interested and started in real estate investing?
Well, actually, I'm an accountant. I didn't like being an accountant, so I decided, and real estate always fascinated me. So I decided to become a real estate agent. I got my real estate license. This was in California, just after Noah docked the boat. And when I was in California, the first thing I started to do, I was always interested in distressed property. And so the first thing I started to do was look at HUD houses. Now, HUD houses were a different breed back then than they are today, because you could buy them at about 50 cents on the dollar pretty regularly. And I started selling HUD houses to investors. And I was making a commission and they were making a profit. And after I did a number of these, I realized these guys were making as much on one deal as I would make to sell them 10. And so I thought maybe I should try and do this myself. Didn't have a lot of money, so I had to go to a hard money lender and borrow some money. But I started investing back then simply because I saw people doing it, and they were basically doing what I wanted to do. So it was just a copycat thing.
Gotcha. So hard money lenders existed back then already? Like, they were already common back then?
No, they weren't common. They were hard to find, but if you went to a real estate investment club, usually you could find somebody who was willing to lend money at a crazy interest rate, but sometimes it was worth it.
Right. Did they have usury laws back then?
They still have usury laws today.
Did they have it back then?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay, just curious.
Yeah, but see, back then interest rates, I forget what they really were, but they were 6%, 7%, 8% in some years back then. And money lending was 16 and 18%. So you had to have a really good deal to be able to justify a hard money loan.
Right. Okay, that sounds good. So, yeah. So you started out selling HUD homes to investors, and then did you end up buying some of those HUD homes for yourself?
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I started to do. I would buy them, fix them, and sell them myself, and make a profit on them.
Gotcha. Okay. And was wholesaling even a thing back then?
I don't remember. I never dealt with wholesalers. I never thought about wholesaling the properties because that wasn't my goal. And so I never really came across many wholesalers. Investment clubs weren't such a big thing back then either. And so even the investment clubs that I went to, guys would share how they found a property or who did a good rehab job for them. But it wasn't like there was guys out there advertising that they had money for sale. So I had to kind of dig it up myself.
Gotcha. Okay. And then, and then share with us, what, I'm sure you've been through several different market cycles. How has those cycles affected you, both negatively and positively? And what did you learn from navigating through those?
Well, It's an interesting question because the market's always going to cycle. In 1989, 1991, because of my background and experience of dealing with foreclosures, I had the opportunity to sell a $16 million hotel foreclosure.
Oh, wow.
And this hotel was built 7 years before at a cost of about $37 million. So that was a commission thing. But what it taught me back then was that was a very bad market. That was when the Resolution Trust Company was closing savings and loans.
Oh, yeah.
And I was investing then and thinking, well, this is a great market to invest in. Then when the market turned around and got stronger, I thought, well, it's all over. You can't invest anymore because you can't buy cheap. And I learned very quickly that that wasn't true. You can still buy. It's a little bit harder to buy. It's just like the market today. It's not an easy market to buy a house cheap today because it's such a hot market. But they're still out there and they still exist if you have a strategy or a plan on how to find them. And that's really a key to being a successful real estate investor, is knowing how to look and where to look for inventory.
Gotcha.
So, the market, whether the cycle is high or low, doesn't make any difference. You might have to work a little bit differently in different cycles, but the market is still there. It still exists. You can still buy and sell. You can still buy and rent very profitably. You might just have to adjust your strategy a little bit.
Gotcha. Okay, so what are some of the things that they should look for when the market is volatile, right? Like, what are some of the things that they should sort of put in place to minimize their risk during those times?
I've always been a big advocate of learning how to manage risk. And when I talk about managing risk, it depends on the market that you're working in as to how you would manage it. I like to flip properties in $100,000 to $200,000 price range. In my market, Melbourne, Florida, that's very middle of the road, middle class America. You go to California, that's very low end, and I understand
Yeah.
it. But the market that I work with is the middle class market. And in order to manage risk, if I can buy a house, for example, I just bought one recently. It's on the market now. I paid $100,000 for it. I put 25 into it. It's on the market for 159. It's not a hugely profitable deal.
Right.
On the risk side, if I don't sell it, if for some reason the market doesn't work for me and I can't sell it, the management of risk still gives me, on the bad side, I can still make about a 10% return on my money. And if you can live with the worst case scenario, then you can live with the deal no matter what. Does that make sense? And so I manage my risk that way. Now, that's not my favorite rental type property. I prefer, and I talked about this a little bit, but I prefer to buy a $50,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 property in not such a great neighborhood. It's not the ghetto. You don't have to carry a gun to collect your rent. But if I can buy a $50,000 house and put $10,000 into it, I can rent it for $800 or $900 a month, which is a better return on your investment. So my strategy for retirement, if you will, is if you can flip 2 or 3 houses at $30,000 a piece profit, with the profit, if you can take that and buy one rental free and clear, then you just added $800 or $900 a month to your positive cash flow for the rest of your life, or as long as you own that property. So now the formula becomes, how much money do you want to make to retire? And you can translate that into how many times would you like to flip houses and take the cash and buy a rental. Does that make sense?
It does. Okay. Yeah.
And every time you add a rental to your stable or your portfolio, then you're adding income. And my goal was always to have passive income that I can go and walk the beach. I live very close to the beach. I go and walk the beach. I'm making money. I ride my motorcycle. I'm making money. That's my strategy.
Gotcha. Yes. I like that strategy too. So, and I know that, yeah, like you said, you advise people to do the flips, take that money and buy rentals with. I know that with your rentals, you own them free and clear.
Yeah.
Why is that? There's a lot of people out there teaching, to leverage it so you can own more rentals. But you're doing the opposite of what, most people out there teach. Could you expand into that and like your insight into that?
Well, I know it's not good or bad either. I mean, the philosophy isn't mine right, theirs wrong, or vice versa. My philosophy is to own stuff free and clear because I don't want any stress in my life. I like my life right like it is, where I do what I want, when I want, because I want, for as long as I want. I don't have to worry about a mortgage payment not getting made, or somebody moving out of a rental that I have because I don't want vacancy. I try and get great tenants, but if I have vacancy, it doesn't hurt me. If you're levered on the property and somebody moves out, you just went from a positive cash flow to a negative cash flow. And if you have enough people do that, that can injure you or potentially bankrupt you. If you've been investing and you've been investing through 2004, 5, 6 up until today, people with the strategy of lever and rent who bought a lot of inventory in 2004, 5, and 6, some of those people went out of business, went bankrupt because when the market went south, they didn't have enough rental income to pay for a reduced the rental incomes reduced to the point where they didn't have enough rental income to pay their mortgages.
Right.
And so I just don't ever want to be in that position.
Gotcha.
So,
yeah. Especially if you're looking at it as a retirement tool too, right? Because in your retirement, you want the least amount of stress possible. The least amount of even properties that you have to manage. I can imagine, right? In your retirement, you rather manage 12 properties that are free and clear than having to manage, 120 properties that are, leveraged.
Absolutely. And I manage my own. I don't have a property manager. It's not true. A couple of them are property managers, but most of them I manage myself. And if I have good tenants and make sure the properties are well maintained, it's very little aggravation. And I don't have to worry so much about tenant turnover. You always have some tenant turnover, but that's not a big thing for me. And the strategy is exactly what you said. I'd rather have 12 properties that run well than have 100 properties and have to have a property manager. Every time you put an employee into your system or onto your payroll, it's a potential problem.
Right.
And so, again, it's not good or bad. It's just my personal strategy. But sometimes when you start, I have the luxury of having the cash to do that now. When you start, you don't. And so maybe when you start, you have to flip a couple and then use that as down payment money. But then I would suggest that you do 15-year mortgages or short-term mortgages so that the strategy would be that ultimately you have the tenant pay for the property. And as long as your mortgage is such that the worst case rental income will cover your mortgage, then you're probably not going to get hurt. See, we're in a market right now where I don't know where everybody else is, but here in Florida, the rental market has been going up every month, every year. But we can't depend on that being the case forever. As more apartments come on stream, as more builders build more rental units, that will have an impact. It's just supply and demand. When the market went south in 2007, a lot of people who lost their houses, those houses were bought up by investors and put into the rental market. And that's what rentals down dramatically for several years. So it's great to budget on what you have today, but it's also great to use your hindsight and look at what's the worst case scenario. If you can live with the worst case scenario, then you've managed your risk well.
Right. That's great. So with your strategy of focusing on properties that are under $100,000 in your market, are you dealing with properties that need more maintenance or that, I know it's not war zone kind of, not like the hood, right? Kind of like properties. But I guess give us an insight into more detailed about the neighborhood that we should be watching for so that way even though we're dealing with the lower end of the market, but that we're still getting good tenants and that there's still not a high maintenance that we have to worry about.
Well, it's a study of the rental demographics in the area that you're planning on investing in. In the demographics that I invest in, I really try and stay away from the major townhouse apartment complexes where there's Section 8 supported. Because that's a demographic that, and I'm not trying to stereotype here, please forgive me if it comes across that way, but it's a demographic that I prefer not to deal with. I don't want to have a property that conforms to a Section 8 inspection. It's not that I have properties that are bad or good. When I buy a property that I'm going to rent, I like to make sure it's got a good roof. I like to make sure it's got a good air conditioning system. Those are the two big costs that will hurt you if you have a sudden catastrophe. If I have those and I try and tile the house, because then I don't have to worry about tearing up carpet every time a tenant does turn over. If those things are good, then you don't really have to worry about huge repair and maintenance bills or issues. Older properties are fine as long as you go through them and make sure that all those issues are in good shape. If you buy houses that were built in the 50s and 60s, many times you're going to have to replumb them. And that's a $3,000, depending on where you are. It's about a $3,000 expense here. But it saves having a pipe break with a tenant in the property, and now you've got carpet or furniture or all kinds of other problems. So I try and, when I do a rehab, even for rental, I try and make sure that it's a property that's not going to be giving us a lot of maintenance issues.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's good to know that you stay away from Section 8 type neighborhoods. Because, that's another strategy that a lot of people, talk about. Like, rent them out on Section 8. You get a higher cash flow.
Listen, I have a Section 8 property right now, and I get a check from the government every month. It's not a bad thing. So I don't have anything against Section 8 particularly, except a lot of the neighborhoods that are heavily Section 8 are the hood type neighborhoods. And I just don't want to be in those neighborhoods. It's dangerous for my tenants. It's dangerous for me. So I just don't want to be in those neighborhoods. But, there's a lot of people who run a strategy of Section 8 properties because they get their check from the government and they don't have to worry about where the money's coming from.
Right.
It's not good or bad. It's their attitude. It's their strategy. This is my attitude and my strategy,
Sounds good. That's awesome. What about home warranty? Whenever your tenants, something happens, do they call you or do they call the home warranty to get those things fixed?
I don't do home warranties. Home warranties and insurance. Any company that sells you a home warranty is an insurance company, and they make a profit on the premiums that you pay. So I just self-insure that way. As a matter of fact, I had a property where there was a plumbing issue 2 days ago, and I have a good team of people, and that's important if you do it the way I do it. I called my plumber yesterday. I called him the day before yesterday. He went out and looked at the problem, called me back in the morning and said he's going to put in a new valve. There's some tile that has to be replaced in the bathroom, then he's going to put a plate over it. And it's going to be done, should be done now as we speak, as a matter of fact. And the cost is $375. Well, the home warranty on that place would be $375 or $400 a year. This is the first thing of that significance that I've done in this property in 3 or 4 years. So, does that make sense? So I just self-insure with repairs and maintenance and things. I'm also very handy if I really have to, and I don't mind going over and doing some stuff sometimes, and I have. So I don't have a problem with it. If you're not a handy person and you don't have good subs, then you should have home warranties.
Gotcha. Okay. Really good to know. So your give us some tips on how you find best tenants. Like on average, how long does a tenant stay with you? How do you? What are some of your pre-screening process that you do that gets you the best tenants possible?
Uh, that's a very good question. And tenant screening is probably the most important thing if you're going to be a landlord. I have an application form that I have, and it costs $50 per person to submit an application. I don't pay that. I tell people straight up, if you want to rent here, the application fee is $50. If it's a husband and wife, it's still $50. If it's a boyfriend and girlfriend, it's $100 because they're separate. But I tell them it's $50 application fee, and if people don't want to pay the application fee, they just can't rent from me. It's really simple. There's other places that may not charge you. Go and rent from them, but this is my requirement. And when I get the application filled out, I have a good company that I just send it. I put it on the fax machine, or I scan it now. In fact, most people don't know what a fax is anymore, but I scan it. I send it to my credit people, and then within 2 or 3 hours, I get back a complete credit and background report. And I base a lot of what I do on that. The things that I usually look for, I tell people even if their credit's not perfect, it's okay. As long as they have no evictions, as long as they have no unpaid utility bills, things like that. Those are all bad signs for a prospective tenant.
I see.
But if somebody has had hospital bills, that's just an unfortunate set of circumstances many times. It might hurt their credit, but it really doesn't affect me as to whether I'm going to rent to them or not.
Right.
So, but that's, the background check is very important as well. It's not a good thing or a bad thing, but convicted felons and child molesters, I wouldn't want them next door to me, so I won't put them next door to somebody else.
Gotcha. Makes sense. What about ongoingly? Do you go and visit once every 6 months, every year? Do you stay? Do you build a relationship with them so you know them well?
All of my tenants I know well. When I do the credit report, I meet them and talk with them. I never do it online. There's some companies that do it online. I'm not that big that I have to worry about it. When they move in, the day they move in, I always go just to walk through. I want to see the quality of furniture they're putting in the place. That tells you a lot about how they live. And then after that, I might drop in once every 6 or 7 months just to say, I'm going to be in the area. I'll pick up the rent instead of mailing it or depositing it or whatever. And it's just because I want to see the property. Most of the tenants that I have now have been in there for, I think the last tenant I had to put in was 2 years ago.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so, and that's only a function of qualifying them well before you put them in. But if they're regularly paying the rent, and I know they're taking care of the property, I drive by every now and then. I don't necessarily go in or even knock on the door. Then I don't worry about it.
Gotcha.
When they move out, I'm going to have to pay.
Right. What about? Do you keep the rent a little bit under market so that way they incentivize them to stay with you?
No, when I rent at market.
Okay.
I don't try and escalate with the market. Meaning, if I've got places right now that I rent for $1,000 a month, and I might be able to get $11.50, but they've been there for 3 or 4 years. They pay regularly. They pay on time. So you
don't have a yearly rent increase, basically.
I don't. No.
Okay. Well, that's an incentive for sure. Yeah.
And see, if you have happy tenants, you're going to be a happy landlord. If you have unhappy tenants, you're going to be an unhappy landlord. The way you treat people in any business is a function of how people will treat you in return. There's people who take that hard-line business attitude where we're going to raise the rent every year, and that's okay. I mean, if that business works for you, that's fine. It's not a bad business model. I'm very happy with my business model. It provides me a wonderful lifestyle. I live the way I want to live. I don't need to do that. I don't want to be really good friends with my tenants because then they start to take advantage of you. And if they're late on the rent and they don't put the late fee in, I call them and say, there's another $50 you forgot. Because I want to remind them that they shouldn't be late. And if they are, I'm not going to let it fly. But other than that, no, I don't. I do raise the rent once every couple of years. I just look at it and say, well, we're a little low here, so we probably should do something. But I'd rather keep a good tenant in. The cost of a tenant turnover, if you think about it, is way more expensive than an extra $50 a month for a year.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's I think it's smart property management. And a friend of mine taught me that years ago, and that's what he called it, smart property management.
That's good.
Coining his phrase, but the cost of turnover is way more expensive than a few extra bucks in rent increase.
Right. Okay. Now, what about your flips? How are you currently, finding those deals? I know you do a few a year, but what are some of your strategies around that?
I think the real secret to being able to flip property, especially today, is having a good system of finding property, good lead generation system. Because it's really hard to be an investor if you got no property to invest in. And in the market that we're working with, it's not easy. At least in the market that I'm working with, it's not easy. And I know it's similar in other marketplaces. But I found the house that I just did, I found on the MLS. The real thing is people are always saying, Stu, what's the secret? Tell me the secret to finding property. And there is a secret, and it's this. The secret is there is no secret. People are looking for what's the easy way. It's just plain hard work today to find properties. I make today between 15 and 20 offers before I get a deal.
I see.
The house that I just had that I bought for $100,000, they wanted 118, and it's 1,500 square foot house, and I know that the retail price per square foot in that neighborhood is $100. So that makes it worth 150 to 160 because they go a little bit higher. But so as long as I know that the retail is $100 a square foot, that's $150,000 house, and I wouldn't pay $118,000 for it. So I made an offer of 90 and they countered at 108, and I just countered back and said, listen, 100,000 is the best I can do, take it or leave it. And they took it.
That's awesome.
But it's the negotiating process. That was on the MLS, and that's how I found that. Now, if I had a realtor doing it, they would have found it for me. I just happen to be a realtor on this one myself. The best way I have found to find property is mailing. It's off-market stuff. It's not listed, so there's been no realtor give them an opinion of how much they can get for it, which is important because a lot of times realtors tell you you can get way more than you can.
Right.
So, mailing to people who are in foreclosure, and you can get those lists from a number of places. Mailing to probate lists, just generally mailing in areas that I know I like to work for rentals. But mailing is a very successful way. It's the most successful way I found. It's also the most expensive way. It costs about $1 a piece for me to mail out. So 1,000 pieces is $1,000. And if you're not mailing out 1,000 at least a month, I don't think you're working the business personally.
Right.
So mailing is one. The MLS, I've certainly found stuff on the MLS. I make a lot of offers on the MLS to find it, but that's another way. If you're not a realtor, just work with a realtor. You might have to interview 10 or 12 to find one who's willing to work with an investor and make a number of offers before they find something. But the key to many real estate agents is this. If you're a realtor and you sell somebody a house today, now you got 5 years before you sell that person another house, because the average person lives in the house that they buy for 5 years. If you're a real estate agent and you work with me as an investor, I did 5 deals last year and I bought them and then I sold them. So that's 10 deals that you could have had if you were working with me.
Gotcha.
Would you work with a client who does 1 deal every 5 years or one who does 10 a year?
Yeah.
And that's the big factor that helps get real estate agents to work with us.
Gotcha.
But that's another way. And then I drive a Toyota truck, and on the side of my truck it says "I buy houses" in big letters.
Oh, that's cool.
and that works.
And you've had that on your truck for a while?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, awesome.
It's paid for the truck.
Awesome. What about teaching, mentoring? Do you do any of that? Have you? I'm sure you've been approached many times of people wanting you to mentor them. Right?
Yeah, I have been approached many times. It's not something that I have done in the past, simply because I have been busy enough doing other things that I didn't want to. Like, I'm very precious. I preciously guard my time. But today I'm more open to doing that because I have more free time. I am retired. I don't really. I need to keep me off the streets. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So I would be open to that, but I don't want to get actively involved in doing a lot of it. But yes, I'm open to teaching people. And I actually teach the real estate classes, how to get a real estate license here.
Oh, okay.
And so I've been approached many times by people from the classes as well. So.
Gotcha. That's cool. So I'm sure by now the people tuning in here would love to know how to get a hold of you. Where do you want, if someone wants to reach out to you, either learn from you, do some business with you, where do you want to send them?
The best place to go is just send me an email. And if you want to send me an email, it's just stewspence@gmail.com. It's STEW, like beef stew. Spence, SP is in Paul, ENCE @gmail. And if anybody wants to get hold of me, they can get hold of me there, and we can talk a little bit that way. And if we feel like there's value in conversation, we can talk on the phone.
Awesome. Great. Stu, thank you so much, sir, for this very invaluable information and tips and tricks that you share with us today. I appreciate you greatly, sir.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Awesome.
Good luck to everybody in their investing careers.
Yes, thank you. Yes. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I have. If so, leave us feedback, leave us comment. Reach out to Stu if you want to do some business with him. And with that, we'll see you on the next interview. All right, bye, everyone.
Have a great day.
Have a great day.
And that's our show for today. If you have any questions or would like to get further training from Tim Mai, please visit our website at www.dodeals.com/Tim.